never stayed long enough to matter anyway. By the time I turned 13 and understood the kind of furniture that moved between a man and a woman, I had gotten so sick of in-out boyfriends that I would leave the house and wait it out at the void deck. And I would be drumming. Thank you. Well, since we have time, as a kind of bonus feature, I will read one more short piece. This story wasn't quite inspired by a missing person per se, but by something that happened to me one night when I was alone at home. This was about 9:30 in the evening, and I was watching the TV, News on 5, and this strange middle-aged lady came to my door, and she asked me, and I live on the 10th floor, which was the highest floor on the block, and she asked me, is there an 11th floor? And I started hearing the strains of Twilight Zone music. Because firstly, the lift doesn't go up anymore, and secondly, there's no staircase leading up. And yet she asked me, is there an 11th floor? So I said, no, this is really the highest floor. There is no 11th floor. So she said, let me go up to look. Well, that spooked me out, so I quickly wrote down exactly what she said. And this is the story that resulted from it. Dominic was home and listless after a fiery day in the office. It had been the hottest day of the year, with the mercury at a relentless 34 degrees. The train was stuffy and late to boot, made worse by the putrid wave of perspiration and unwashed bodies jostling for space. Everything felt warm to the touch, even the walls and floor at home, baked dry by the afternoon sun. Half listening to News on 5 about the Haiti earthquake, Dominic barely had time to take a stab at his packed dinner when a woman came to his door. The gate was locked, but the door was open. She looked in her mid-50s, disheveled and wispy, as though she had just woken up from a long nap. Wearing a red blouse with three-quarter black slacks, she seemed to glide rather than walk, and had a peculiar habit of fingering a rosary around her right wrist. "Excuse me, is there a 10th floor?" she asked, her voice low and husky. This was most peculiar. Didn't the buttons in the lift clearly show there was no 10th floor? And surely she would have seen there was no staircase leading up. She must have gotten the wrong block, Dominic decided. There is no 10th floor. This is the 9th floor and it is already the highest floor, he explained, folding his arms across his chest modestly as he approached the gate. Do you have the right address? I remember there is a 10th floor, she continued, seemingly unconvinced. My dream cannot be wrong. The girl in my dream keeps sketching in her notebook. This block has always had 9 floors since it was built, Dominic said, mystified. Oh, I will go up and see, she said, and she shuffled her way down the corridor. Over the next few days, as the sun continued stripping grass of its green and people of their energy, more strangers came to Dominic's door, always around 9:30 p.m. Young and old, men and women, they looked like people you would meet in the streets. He had no idea who they were or why they had come specifically to his door. And without fail, they would ask him about the 10th floor. Some said they had dreamt about it, like the woman who came the first night, while others said they had read or heard about it. For reasons he could not understand or accept, they all believed a 10th floor had always existed in this block. Was this some kind of mass hysteria? This block has always had 9 floors since it was built, he found himself repeating night after night. By the 4th night, however, he could hear himself sounding less and less convinced. Surely it was not possible that a new floor would appear out of nowhere just because enough people believe in it. It must have been the heat. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, one of the things about Ethos Books launches is that we always encourage the audience to ask lots of questions and make life hard for the writer. Because we believe that when you make life hard for him, his next book will be better. So, first question, anybody?
I think my son has one.
I do not have one yet. I'm thinking, I'll get there.
Okay. Anybody has any questions to ask Felix? About the book? About his writing process? About his life? Oh, yeah.
Hi. In writing your stories, particularly your stories, is it cathartic or is it more, or do you ever spook yourself out?
Could you repeat that?
Your writing, I mean, it's obviously something that, I mean, as we know, it's something that hits you and that you have to write, you have to do this. Is it for you, I mean, do you find yourself, afterwards, or do you scare yourself? Do you spook yourself out?
Yes, I do sometimes. In fact, one of the characters in this collection, one of the missing people, haunted me so much that I even dreamt about him. Is this old man in his 60s who apparently told his wife he was going downstairs to buy newspapers and never came back. He didn't take his passport with him. He didn't take any luggage with him. He just went downstairs like any ordinary day and he never came back. So I was trying to create a backstory for this particular character. So I see these people as just characters in a story, and trying to imagine what was his backstory, what was he doing or thinking, such that he would just up and go. So he haunted me because I couldn't quite pin down exactly why. So I dreamt about him, and in the morning I woke up and there was a eureka moment. There was a light bulb that flashed, and I finally understood why he had to leave.
Wow. Okay. Well, read about the story in the book. The author will be available to sign the book when you're over there later after the event. Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Gentlemen?
Hi, Felix. How long did the whole process take you to complete the book, from the research to the writing?
Well, the whole process took about 2.5 years. My initial challenge was trying to kill the poet, because I have been a poet for 15 years or so. I mean, on and off, I do write short stories, but having retired from poetry, so to speak, after having published my new and selected poems, I found it difficult to make that transition to being a fiction writer. So, because the two kinds of writing take very different skills. For a poet, the ability to encapsulate an emotion, crystallize a thought is more important. So you have to be pinpoint sharp in terms of bringing out, expressing certain things. A fiction writer, on the other hand, takes a little while to expand and create a setting. So you need to embed a character in a story that is believable, both the characterization as well as the setting. So it took me a while to kill and bury the poet before the fiction writer could emerge. So initially the manuscript turned out to be short pieces, like flash fiction pieces. Each story maybe about 800 words. That wasn't enough. And I think Mr. Fong can attest to that I struggled with the manuscript for quite a bit. So after about a year of, pruning and twisting the words, it came to only about 20,000 words. Still not enough for a collection. So earlier this year, around about April, in between my teaching semesters, I sat myself down at 112 in Katong at Toast Box, and usually with a teh pok next to me. I would discipline myself. I would not get up from this chair until I've written at least 1,000 to 500 words. At least 1,500 to 2,000 words every day, just pulling words out like, a dentist pulling your wisdom tooth out. It was painful, but it was gratifying at the same time.
Can I say something as well? But as a person who has read the book, I feel that there's also still an element of the poet in him, because the book doesn't quite read like, in a general fiction prose. There's still a poetic fashion to his words, which is nice. It's a nice change from the everyday book, which I appreciate. Yeah.
I didn't get him to say that, okay?
Yes. I really believe that.
This is an endorsement from a Gen Y reader.
Thank you, Ryan. Any other questions? Okay, the gentleman behind. Oh, you give way to a lady. Well done.
Hi, Felix.
Hi.
I just wanted to ask, why did you feel that you had to kill and bury the poet, and why did you choose to move on to fiction writing?
Well, I stopped writing poetry because I was basically repeating myself. And I always feel that with every project a writer does, he has to reinvent himself. He has to kick himself down the stairs and pick himself and up and learn to walk again. Otherwise, it's all too simple. So after I published the new and selected poems in 2009, I found that I was merely repeating myself, and I was getting bored with it. It came too easy. If something comes too easy for you, you better be suspicious about it, because it shows that you're not learning anymore as a writer. So that's why I decided to maybe put aside poetry for a while and then try something else. So perhaps there will be a time when I'm bored with fiction, and then I'll move to something else as well. Maybe pornographic writing. There is a market for it. Check out 50 Shades of Grey. It sells by the truckloads. Who buys this, If I sell 500 copies, I'll be so happy. Remus?
Hello Felix. In your transition, right, from poetry to fiction writing, and learning the craft for writing fiction, like who or where do you turn to pick up the skills? Who are your influences, for example? I think the second story you read about the autistic kid, and all the secrets he has, reminds me a lot of Hemingway's My Old Man. Just like also a young boy talking about his father and how he lived his life from his own point of view.
Well, for this particular collection, I wouldn't pin any writer down as influence or inspiration. I suppose I'm the combination of different influences over the years, different people I've read over the years. So for example, you can detect tones or undertones of Haruki Murakami, for example, the surreal elements. There are undertones of, say, Chuck Palahniuk, because for one time I was really into his fiction. I was reading Fight Club all the way to Survival. So different people have pressed their fingerprints on my writing and left an indelible mark on it. But I hope that something of that, of my own voice, comes through despite the influences.
I saw a hand over here.
Robert.
Robert, would you like to give way to the lady first? Oh, okay, go ahead.
Hi Felix.
Hello.
How well do you think you've moved away from the technicalities of poetry writing to telling a story?
I think I've succeeded somewhat. From the feedback I've gotten so far to my book, most people say that the prose is the stories are quite page-turning. They're quite intrigued by the idea behind some of these stories. And I think I've heard someone tell me that she managed to finish reading the book in a day. Well, it's a very slim collection anyway. So In terms of moving away from poetry, not so successful, because there are still certain turns of phrase, certain ways that I capture an emotion, as my son has pointed out, that still show the poet at work. So it's not fully dead and buried, it's a zombie crawling around, waiting to come up, surface for air. Robert?
Your title is Vanishing Point, which means that you have to write with a point in mind, people vanishing. Was it difficult to, as it were, fix your stories to accommodate the idea of people vanishing?
It's not so difficult because in our day-to-day life, we do sometimes vanish. For example, you may be physically present, attending a meeting or listening to a lecture, but you may not be mentally and psychologically present. You have vanished into your memory, you have vanished into thinking about the future, what you're going to have for dinner tonight. On a day-to-day basis, we do that as well. It's not just not just physically vanishing, but psychologically and mentally as well. And sometimes even spiritually. For example, one of the stories here is about a video game addict. A boy who is so addicted to video games, he loses his thumb, metaphorically speaking.
Questions?
Alethea?
More?
Come on.
I need to hear him go, then he'll become a better writer in the next book.
Yeah, over there. One of my ex-students. I'm putting her on the spot.
Okay, thank you. Do this to me every single class. Okay, I guess I kind of want to know, is there any favorite particular story, or any particular missing persons that you feel very attached to while you're writing this book?
That's like asking me which particular ghost am I more attached to. They're all ghosts in a way to me. I suppose the one that I told you about, I was so haunted by his picture that I dreamt about him. That cat probably would be the most memorable. The one who said he was going downstairs to buy newspapers and never came back. But there was another girl whose story was quite haunting as well. She apparently disappeared around my neighborhood where I stay, Marine Terrace. This was, I think, 2006 or something like that. She went to a party around Marine Terrace, block 19. I think, Sunny, your block. She said that she was leaving about 3 a.m. She was going home. She hailed a taxi and never went home. She disappeared. So to this day, her case is still unsolved. If you go to the police force website, her face is still there. Very intriguing. And she was a second or third year student at LaSalle College of the Arts, where I teach part-time as well.
Questions? Oh yeah, ask him a difficult one. Okay, Robert.
Felix, you said, we began by saying that when you write prose, you have to bury the poet.
Yes.
Now, writing fiction and writing poetry are two different skills.
Yes.
So why do you have to bury the poet? I mean, if your prose is poetic, and indeed they are, it's an asset, not to be buried.
Yes, but the poet sometimes get in the way of the fiction writer. The poet wants to shrink words down to their minimum, to the point that not even a full stop can escape. Whereas a fiction writer's job is to expand and embellish and kind of create a more roundedness to a story, which a poet doesn't quite do in a poem.
But there are poetic phrases in your fiction which enhance your story. Maybe
Yes.
you can read us an excerpt to demonstrate it.
Okay.
While he's looking for that, I think another way of saying it is that in poetry, what my dad tries to do is to let the reader do a lot of the thinking. So you imagine the characters based on the words there, but the character isn't fully fleshed out based on the poetry and just the words on the page. Whereas in fiction, what he tries to do is to create a more wholesome character whereby you don't have to do as much of the thinking yourself. I think that's one way of putting it.
Wow, Ryan, great tag team partner. Okay.
Doing my job.
Dinner on me tonight.
Excellent.
Okay, here it goes. This is a story, or part of a story called Remember the Wormhole of 2030. So it's a science fiction story. Here I'm trying to describe this character who is abducted by the government. In his mind's eye, the mind inside his eyes, Cheong is 22 years old again. He smiles faintly in recognition of the young man's put on bohemian air, the world weariness of one who has perhaps read too much and experienced too little. Tall and gangly, dressed in gaunt black, he wears his hair long, his temper short, and his philosophy on his sleeve, literally. One of his favorite t-shirts has Descartes proclaiming, "I think, therefore I am," as though the great French philosopher had written it for a bumper sticker and not the end game of a philosophical treatise. For Cheong, these are the days of carefree aphorisms, when idealism comes easy in a throwaway catchphrase. So I suppose that is poetic in a sense, because it manages to capture the personality of a character in just a very few words. It's like quick strokes of pen.
Okay. Maybe one last question.
Oh, Mr. Gui.
Okay. This one is going to be a tough one.
Holy cow.
Actually, it's a question for Ryan.
Oh,
cool. I'm wondering, you've read your father's writing for over a decade now.
Mm-hmm.
What have you learned about your father primarily from his writing?
You're right, it was a tough one. What have I learned? I think it's mainly how his life experiences have influenced his writing, because in his books we always see a lot of what he is as a person and how he became the person he is today. In this current book which he's promoting, there's a lot of autobiographical aspects in it, so I see echoes of my life with him and how I am to him and his life as a whole. And his previous book, it's based in Marine Parade, which is the area where he lives, and it's interesting to see how his past experiences affect him now. I mean, you don't see that on a day-to-day basis. It's only in his writing that I find that. So I think that's mainly it.
Okay, and now for the politically incorrect answer.
I hadn't actually thought of that one yet.
As a person, what are the qualities you see in his writing that maybe you didn't know was in him if you knew him as a person only?
Poetic expression. In daily life, when I speak to him, he doesn't quite sound as eloquent. It's simple words, simple phrases. But when I read it, it's like, whoa, this guy's a genius.
And now for the politically incorrect answer.
What?
That was politically correct. Something politically incorrect.
But you're such a great writer. What's there to say?
Wow.
Okay, dinner for the next 2 weeks on me.
Show them your tattoo, Felix. Okay.
I'm quite a badass.
That's what he likes to think.
Okay, I think we had the last question. Anybody wants a last question before you go to book signing? No? If not, then thank you very much.
Thank you very much for coming, everyone.
For coming by. Hope you enjoyed yourself. And there's going to be another. Ethos is carrying on with another book launch at about 4:15 by Rosemary Somaya. It's a book on the Nevermind Girl and other stories. So if you have the time, please feel free to sit in and enjoy the stories. Right? Meanwhile, Felix, you can go sign the book.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.